Nirav Merchant is the co-PI for NSF Cyverse, a national-scale cyber infrastructure for life sciences, and NSF Jetstream, the first user-friendly, scalable cloud environment for NSF Exceed. He received his undergraduate degree in industrial engineering from the University of Pune, India, and graduate degree in systems and industrial engineering from the University of Arizona. Over the last 2 decades, his research has been directed towards developing scalable computational platforms for supporting open science and open innovation, with emphasis on improving research productivity for geographically distributed interdisciplinary teams. His interests include data science literacy, large-scale data management platforms, data delivery technologies, managed sensor and mobile platforms for health interventions, workforce development, and project-based learning. Nirav, thank you and welcome.
Thank you, guys. It definitely is an honor for me to be part of the keynote. I am sad that all of you are not with me here in Tucson, but given the circumstances, I'm hoping all of you are healthy and doing well. So I will jump into my keynote, and I decided to call it Conversation with Your Data Platform. But before I move forward with my keynote, I just wanted to show you guys where you would be and how it would look. So this is our beautiful campus in Tucson, Arizona. This is the building that our UGM was scheduled in. You can see at the bottom floor, that's where our conference room is. It's a very nice stadium seating, and we'll be having fun. So imagine yourself sitting in that seat right now, looking at that big screen and the meeting starting. But I also want you to imagine how the meeting would end at the day. And this is where you will definitely find Terrell and Jason and Mike Conway for sure. This is a hangout when they visit. And we would be enjoying a lot of beer in 1702, which is the building across, and definitely a lot of margaritas because you are in Tucson, Arizona. So imagine all of this in your virtual world, and I hope to have a chance to let you enjoy this in the real world in a future UGM. So data platforms, it means different things to different people. Or it's a combination of humans, data, and machines. And those machines could be computational machines. Data could be different types of data. But data platforms bring all of that together. So let's talk a bit about it. So very often in research, we try and combine this in different ways. And in this Venn diagram, you can sort of see where things come together. But unless you have a platform that brings all of this together, it is very rare to have the productivity that you need. You may have someone that acquired data but not analyze it, or someone that can analyze it but can't acquire it. A data platform goes across all of those. It's much bigger than data management. It's much bigger than analysis by itself. It's a combination of many things. So what do you expect from your data platform? Well, the most common thing people equate to is I have data and I'm going to process it to make it into information. And we are pretty good at it. We've learned how to do that fairly effectively. Then comes the next part, which is to move it from information forward to knowledge. And that's where we need to bring in the cognition and analysis that are much higher order. We are getting there, but we are nowhere there. But with ML AI, we are coming there. And we are now able to take data to information onto knowledge. And then with the knowledge, as we start making decisions and judgments, we definitely reach the tip of the pyramid, which is wisdom. And this collectively is called the DIKW. You may have seen it in different ways and different forms. And in reality, everybody tries to strive for it, but we pretty much exist in the first and second tier from the bottom. The top two tiers are something that we are not very good at right now. The reality is our data platforms are much like Rube Goldberg's invention. There are cobbled together systems that we try and do things to achieve our research goals. This actually is a postage stamp dedicated to Rube Goldberg. And those of you who don't know who he was known for making these intricate systems to do some really simple tasks, like this gentleman's trying to consume soup, but somebody's wanting to clean their face using a kerchief, but the process involves a lot more than you can imagine. And we've all lived Rube Goldberg's life in some shape or form, building different platforms to do our science. This is actually Rube Goldberg working under an early animation camera and trying to put a system together. And we often go through that. But we really need to go beyond the data to knowledge framework. We've talked about that for decades. We really need to go beyond that. And what does that look like? And how does the data platform work with us to get us there? So I introduced you to something called the Krebs cycle of creativity, KCC. This actually is something that Neri Oxman, a faculty professor at MIT Media Lab, has been talking about for the last few years, where science is something that converts information to knowledge, as you saw in the pyramid that I showed you. Engineering converts that knowledge into utility. And then design converts that utility into cultural behavior and context. And finally, art takes that context and questions our perception of the world. How do things work the way they do? Why do we perceive it this way? And our role as a community, our role as data stewards, our role as data platform providers is to enable all of these. It's not just that our role is to enable somebody doing next generation sequencing, or somebody doing astronomy, or somebody doing geospatial work. Our duty as a community is to support all of this and to enable creativity. So this is sort of what KCC is. And those of you who haven't had a chance, I would highly recommend. Last year, Netflix had something called The Abstract, in which Neri Oxman and her work is featured. And she does a lot of work on bioarchitecture, where how do you build things using nature? And it's amazing, and her work is phenomenal. But when you start thinking of the data that goes behind enabling something like this, and a community that's that diverse, it takes a lot. So now I've taken you from KCC and made you feel from Rube Goldberg to Atlas, where the weight of the world is on your shoulders. So data platforms that work for every use case or every discipline exist only in marketing brochures or on TV. They are pretty much mythical characters that you can throw a lot of money at, but most likely they will not meet what you need. You tend to make them for yourselves by putting things together, which again takes you back to the Rube Goldberg machine. We don't want the Rube Goldberg machine, but we want a data platform that works for many, many disciplines. And supporting diverse communities is a common occurrence now. It's almost a requirement for anybody in an academic or a research environment, where each researcher is fairly unique and the use case is fairly unique, and how they want to utilize your platform is unique. You cannot just fit everybody in one big box. The big box, like the cloud providers, may want you to think that by buying bucket storage, you solve the problem of data management, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, as we all know. And the cost of terabyte of just raw storage is going down and has always been going down, but managing it is getting more and more expensive, and is getting harder as things get distributed. As you get into the world of multi-cloud, you have cloud in your own environment, cloud with multiple commercial providers, and keeping track of where your data is, what's being done with it. All of that is a responsibility that many of us share and possibly feel like Atlas on any given day. So hopefully, by feeling like Rube Goldberg and like Atlas, should give you a sense of the community, and we all share the pain, but we want to solve this in some comprehensive way. Now let's add a little bit more. Here is the Tower of Babel. And now we are all in the business of supporting open science, open access, open policy, and open data. And we now expect that from our data platform in many different ways. Here is a prime example. In today's COVID era, you have to be able to do this, be able to address a global emergency where sharing is central to everything that we want to do, whether it's coming up with a vaccine and coming up with a cure that is validated, tested by the community. All of that is hinging on open access and the ability of the community to see that and make sure that the right thing is being done for all of us. And so when you start looking at open science, there are many layers to it. But the most common thing that you see is open access, open data, open reproducible research. So now I've added one more responsibility to our data platform, which is reproducible research. And then, of course, the evaluation, the policies, and tools. So collectively, to support open science, you need a data platform that can do many different things. And so now at this point, I've taken you from Rube Goldberg to Atlas, and I figured the internets very rarely fail us. So I said, what is the most epic punishment that's doled out by Greek gods? And the answer was Zeus changed Prometheus to a rock where an eagle would eat his liver every night. But his liver would grow back, but then the eagle would come back and then again go at it. And I'm sure many of you feel like that when you're managing data platforms. But thankfully, Chiron came along and took care and liberated it. And so what I want to talk about is iRods and how it is liberating us from the eagle coming in, going at our liver every night. And so with that, I will go into more details about our conversation with iRods. And before I go there, I do want to acknowledge as a community, Regan and Raja, Mike and Wayne, they were the pioneers, if you may, that started iRods. I remember the early days of Storage Resource Broker, which eventually became iRods. And I am very grateful to Jason and Terrell as the next generation that has taken it forward and made it even more awesome. And that speaks volumes of the management style, the importance of handing over the baton to the next generation, and the community rallying around things and keeping them moving forward. For many of you, the realization may not be there, but funding is extremely hard to get for infrastructure projects. National Science Foundation that funds our work in many cases in the US, and justifiably so. They like to fund innovation, but once something becomes stable and usable, they consider that to be sustainable, and that is not the kind of work that they pour more money in. And so the responsibility comes on to the community and other leaders that keep this running and moving forward. Even though innovation is happening, it is not the same innovation that a funding agency expects, because there is always tension between innovation and production. And we have been amazingly fortunate that Regan, Raja, Jason, Terrell all have taken this to the next generation and kept it going. So innovation and creativity and freedom of choice, that is what drives most researchers. And when we look at democratizing innovation, and if you've not seen this book, it's an open source book. Eric von Hippel at MIT speaks a lot about it, where if you want to give something, give it to the people who are hurting the most. And when they build a solution, that solution usually is a lot more accessible to many people, because the person that was hurting took the tools and solved it the way that mattered the most for them. And I see iRods in the same way, where people have done things and then they've shared that to create a rich intellectual commons. This user group meeting is a classic example where we've all come together, taking innovation from our little toolboxes and then enhancing what we can do in iRods. So data platforms are central to democratizing this innovation because we are now empowering many of our users to do interesting things because their data is handled more effectively. Their collaboration is now being able to flourish across institutional boundaries at scales that matter to their science. So a real data platform actually is more about enabling user-driven innovation. You have to give them that freedom to be able to innovate using your data platform. And a data platform is part of an ecosystem. There is no single provider of infrastructure, but a federation. Distributed data grids and your data is everywhere today, and you have to be able to manage it. Container orchestration has become a reality for all of us in some shape or form. Some of you may not like it as much, but end of the day, that is what is driving a lot of what we do when it comes to new methods, new analysis, whether it's Singularity on HPC or Docker in the cloud or Rocket or whatever new things come out next week. And your analysis comes to your data. Distributed computing is everywhere. Your computation runs on your local machine and it flies to Amazon or Google and comes back. But the data needs to be managed and you need to know where it is. Searching and indexing becomes equally important, but more critical is teaching your users how to integrate this across the boundaries of all these organizations. And finally, API-based extensibility and automation are first-class citizens. If your data platform cannot do all of these, you pretty much are going to be having a hard time staying up with the innovation that your users are expecting. So the data platform also is dealing with new generations of applications. The application stacks are becoming complex. They are AI, ML models that need to be connected to an event. We are now in a world that's way beyond HPC and batch processing workload. And most of these come with web servers, some opinionated JavaScript, databases, message buses, and the ecosystem of Shiny, R, Jupyter notebooks is constantly being extended by the community that needs access to the data that's in the data platform. So all of this collectively forms the data platform. If we talk of iRods by itself and not the ecosystem, we are not thinking of it as a data platform. And we look at it as a data platform in my projects. So what I would tell you is ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, which is what John F. Kennedy said. And I would say, ask not what iRods can do for you, ask what you can do for the iRods community. And this user group meeting is about that. And I'm hoping to the next few days, we will talk about it as a community and what we can do. So iRods is a community data platform. And this is sort of my concluding slides. It's given us a vendor neutral solution. The reason we use iRods in our projects is we are no longer beholden to a given vendor, whether, it doesn't matter who they are. I don't care what their file system is. I just want to get science done. And whether the data comes from Amazon buckets or is something that's completely in-house, it all is the same to me. What we need to do is build an ecosystem of tools and solutions around it. iRods has allowed us to support large projects with ease. We need to support the long tail of science, and we need to make it easy for those researchers, especially making it easy for them to install things on their Mac, on their PC, and being able to be high performant regardless of how they're coming to use the data platform. It has allowed us to work with cloud storage. You will hear a lot more about the S3 buckets and what can be done. We need to make it cloud native and a first-class citizen that's fluent in speaking all the cloud access patterns, not just one, so that all the tooling that's being created by the community, whether you want to point it to Amazon, or you want to point it to iRods, or you want to point it to Globus. I don't want my users to be thinking about it. I want them to point it to iRods. The rest just is magic that should happen, and I know we can make it happen. Given the training material and documentation that iRods has put out, we need to create learning material and train our colleagues in its use. And this is really important for institutional data repositories. And I feel very strongly about this because I have seen my own campus where the budgets of our libraries are completely decimated as time have gone by. And the best thing they can do to support it is to outsource it to different groups to support what the campus needs. But when you look at what our researchers are doing at the scale that they're doing, we cannot support that in multi-terabyte range or working at the scale. But you can, if you have iRods available, it's a lot more economical, it's a lot more friendly for those communities. We just have to show them how to do it and help them through it. And so I feel very strongly that as a community, we have to be more welcoming to the end users from the long tail, the people who are managing institutional infrastructure that don't have the IT depth to install the servers, but have some understanding and working with them. So I will conclude my talk by saying I see all of us in the background here, and we are all superheroes in our own ways. And I strive to live by this African proverb, which is, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you have to go together. And this user group meeting is all about going really far and together so we can go as far as possible. So thank you for your time, and I will end my talk.
Thank you, Nirav. That's wonderful. I like that a lot. We do have a couple questions. One is a written question from Mike Conway at the NIEHS. He says that he's getting interested in the GA4GH standards, the TES and WES standards, and the workflow languages like CWL and WDL. Is all of that on your radar, and are you integrating with that already? Do you have skunkworks? How is that going?
Good question, Mike. First thing, I am relying on you to drive some of that, but yes, it is absolutely on our radar. We have been a little bit shy in terms of adopting those directly because the ecosystem around it was not very mature for our user community, because a lot of them come from the plant sciences side, but they are also now trying to extend and adopt GA4GH standards. So we are very, very motivated to work with that. And as you know, many of the workflows expect data to come from buckets, which again lines up with what I was talking. So short answer, absolutely. On the workflow side, we are heavily vested in everything from SnakeMake to Makeflow to Pegasus. CWL being more of a specification. If a tool adopts CWL, much like how SnakeMake has iRods bindings, I'm expecting whatever is executing CWL just understands the bindings, and then we have buckets that it talks to.
Right. And so Mike is going through me. I'm channeling Mike. He says, gotcha. We'd love to see this consortium presence at some of those standards bodies as well.
Absolutely, yes. And that's the important part. There's only so far Jason Terrell and the team can be. I would request this community to be at these events, which I'm sure many of you are, and speak about what iRods can do and then bring those back. I know pull requests are hard to come by from people on the outside. So the onus always comes on to the core team managing iRods, but I still think we have to help them prioritize, because every shiny thing that we say the community wants, it's hard to implement. And that also is a little bit of segue for me here, that many of us may not give pull requests or do things that are code based, but there are things that we can do as a community to get the word out. And I'm not saying we want global domination through iRods, but I definitely want global awareness of building data platforms with iRods. So some of these things, when you are at a standards meeting, bringing up what standards they're gravitating towards and how iRods can be part of that conversation, I think is really important.
Excellent. Let's see, we have Jason is saying that training is an excellent point. How can we as a community foster local groups such as U2 Connect in the Netherlands in the same way that they're doing their own trainings now? Do you have any insight into that?
I think we need to syndicate our training material. So much good work is happening globally for iRods. If I would propose something for this user group meeting, it definitely would be if either the GitHub presence for iRods, if we can have material that can be put there. Many of us now start using, read the docs or RST formats, where we can take a learning lesson from one group and then sort of mix it and present it. But when the changes happen, because it's under some version control, we all are aware of it, and then we know what is happening. So I would very much welcome the chance of talking about how we could achieve that, but syndicating our training material and not reinventing the wheel is essential. And one reason I would say that's critical is teaching to a diverse community is not just reading from the slides or pointing them. There's a lot of customization that needs to happen. And if you've done it for the library science community or the social science community, we should take that and then do that. There are a lot of lessons we can learn from the software carpentry and data carpentry community about that, and then empowering people to have their own workshops. And I would be more than happy to talk at length about it.
Yeah, we've been tangentially related to the carpentry community. We found that we are niche enough still that it's hard to spend the time and the effort to get the kind of generalized community documents out there when there's so many other things going on. But yeah, I think generic things that can be tailored to specific use cases is probably the fastest way to get there.
And they also have the concept of train the trainer.
Yeah.
And that's what we need. And if you look at the pedagogy that they prescribe to, and those of you, if you have a chance, there's a awesome book by the creator of software carpentry, where teaching tech together is the title of the book. And if you read that, you'll get a different level of empathy trying to teach technology focused things to communities where it's really hard for them to grasp some of these things. But if you explain it in context, it really resonates and people adopt what you're trying to teach them.
That's
Greg
right.
Wilson is the author. Yeah.
Yes. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? Audibly, we can unmute you if you have a question. We have a comment here from John Constable, our favorite commenter. It says some examples of how to integrate iRods in things like Cromwell, SnakeMake, Nextflow would be helpful. So yeah, we don't necessarily have those experiences ourselves because we don't run it in production for our own team's use. So those kind of things would be helpful to kind of probably crowdsource or gather from the community as well.
Yeah, we have a webinar on SnakeMake that we did in Cyverse, and it contains how to connect to iRods. I'll look into maybe during the UGM posting a link to that. And also the Read the Docs for SnakeMake has a section for iRods, but as John rightly pointed out, for a lot of the scientists, seeing it in use makes a lot of sense. So I will definitely put that out.
Very good. Last chance. Anybody have any questions? No hands are up. Well, we will all clap for you in our homes. Thank you so much, Nirav. And there's no pictures of Sonora dogs in your slides. I think
I know. I realized that for that you'll have to come to Tucson and enjoy it. And we will do this again, and we will all enjoy margaritas and beers and beautiful sunsets in Tucson.